Donald Trump gave an interesting presentation, and this, my friends, is all about geopolitics. In fact, there are clear signals that the US intends to secure its status as the absolute dominant power in the Atlantic. Donald Trump against a beautiful backdrop, and this backdrop presents to the world the project of a new battleship. Of the armed forces, the United States Army, the Navy, the battleship will bear the surname of Donald Trump himself. You see, the Trump class, and this, friends, is not a joke. Indeed, Donald Trump wants the new battleship to immortalize him. I don't know, but for American military history, that's for sure. But on the other hand, once again, this is not just a hint, friends. This is precisely symbolism, enormous, yes, and a signal, including to all the naval powers of the world, about the fact that now, with joy, persistence, and even bravado, I would say, they are intercepting tankers considered to be part of Venezuela's gray fleet, but in fact are tankers of the Russian Federation's gray fleet. That this whole geopolitical story has a single ultimate goal: to simply squeeze out and marginalize the Russians, the Venezuelans, and absolutely anyone else from the vast waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the United States dominates there. About the interception of tankers, it doesn't stop. Already now, our sixth tanker has effectively been stopped, and there, without trial or investigation, without a fight, without resistance, without anything, the Coast Guard carried out another successful operation in the Caribbean basin. A tanker under flags. In fact, Russian Federation tanker number 6 has been seized, and all of this is being reported with joy by the Southern Command of the United States Army. The landing operation, and now there are a few details, was carried out from the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford, the very same carrier that often approaches the shores of Israel in the Mediterranean Sea, thus covering Israel with its protective shield. Now it is taking part, as you can see here, in the Caribbean basin, the sixth, but most likely not the last, because the list of these tankers that are changing their identity on the go, trying to break through the blockade in Venezuela's inland waters towards the Atlantic. It already numbers 20 vessels, and there will be more. There's no doubt about that. The tanker that was seized, as it turned out, and it was also an awkward situation, was called Veronica, and now it has been renamed Galileo, and its registration is, well, questionable. Taganrog. In other words, it's exactly the same thing that happened with the Mariner tanker. By the way, regarding the Mariner tanker, just so no one has any doubts, the owner of this tanker, registered in Crimea, is Ilya Buhai from the company Buravest Marine. So everything falls into place. The fight against the Venezuelan shadow fleet is turning into a fight, and an open one at that, against the Russian shadow fleet. Russia is not reacting to this in any way, nor is it responding to the sixth seizure of yet another tanker. Yesterday, Putin had plenty of opportunities to comment on all this, but he did not. Not a word from him. He spoke about peace in the whole world. That was mentioned, as were the root causes of Russian aggression in Ukraine, that too. There was talk about openness and a call to comply with international law, but nothing was said about the sixth tanker. And there are certain explanations for this because, friends, the subscription has basically ended from China's side toward the Russian Federation. What is happening now? Look at what the Telegram channel Ruski Borscht is writing. A very interesting Telegram channel, but thanks to my team for this reminder. The unbreakable friendship sprang a leak. China, in an ultimatum-like tone, has started demanding payment from Russia for the use of anchorages. 60. Under the oil tanker that's anchored in Biryogi, PRC. That's what's happening. The tankers have stopped. The cargo, which the US announced, it doesn't matter right now what's on board. We think it's oil. Let's assume it's oil as an option. And so they're just standing there, not going anywhere anymore. They're not heading toward Venezuela either because they don't know what will happen next. Obviously, they'll all be seized. China doesn't want to play these games anymore, seeing how decisively Trump insists on the annexation of Greenland, how he threatens the Ayatollah regime that's been holding on in Iran since '79, yes, very decisively. How everything is happening now in the Atlantic with the Russians. China wants to stick to the agreements that exist between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump understands this perfectly well. He understands the need of the US Department of Defense for rare earth metals. You know that Pete Hegseth announced full technological modernization, the reorganization of the army, and so on. But without Chinese rare earth metals, nothing will happen. And that's why China apparently has already agreed on everything with Washington. And the condition is we will act in a business-like manner, or at least demonstrate that we are conducting business. For example, as a country with the Russian Federation. But we don't want those Russian Federation tankers, the gray ones, the shadow fleet, to just be sitting there. At least let's get some money for that, because we're not going to be your cover. That's why Putin kept silent yesterday. Now about China. The amounts that Chinese companies are billing now are several times higher than what they charged before. If the Russian Federation does not agree to pay, the tankers may be removed from the anchorages forcibly. Russian companies are now actually in a very tough situation. A few weeks of downtime at alternative ports or sanctions pressure. In other words, they could just sink these tankers and that's it. So there won't be any problems. What to do now is absolutely unknown. There is huge concern in the Kremlin, but it's not so much about the significant financial and economic burden, though, but more about this deeply concerning and problematic precedent. This unexpected and painful stab in the back from the so-called elder brother Beijing to Moscow. Tankers carrying Urals oil have been anchored at Chinese ports for several weeks and cannot unload. Most of the vessels are medium-sized as well as large. Given their size, they are capable of transporting between 70,000 and 120,000 tons. And some of them arrive from Murmansk and Arctic ports. And in fact, this is the problem that has emerged. Solving it would essentially mean weakening Putin in any case and making a concession to the United States. It would be an admission of their inability to protect the shadow fleet, which makes it possible for the Russian Federation to continue its aggression, including on the territory of a sovereign country, Ukraine. That's the story. Now, a little bit about this Veronica. It was seized this morning in the southern part of the Caspian Sea off the coast of Venezuela by the United States. Last week, it changed its name and registration to the Russian tanker Galileo, with its home port listed as Taganrog. That's awkward. And one more safe haven, at least that's what the Kremlin considered it to be until today, just stopped being safe. Sources in the Russian Ministry of Defense admit that shipping in the Caspian Sea, my friends, is no longer safe. It's happening right here, you see. Please, go ahead. The day before, there was a disaster. The Iranian cargo ship Arona, 14 crew members were rescued, but the ship's cargo went to the bottom. Rumor has it that there might have been a very special cargo on board. But for now, there are no details. Earlier, several of our drilling rigs were attacked in the same area, and there was also information about incidents involving cargo ships traveling from Iran to Russia. Officially, these facts were not confirmed, and our side remained silent. Previously, they spoke about this topic reluctantly. Now, experts acknowledge that the Caspian Sea has become dangerous and an urgent response is needed here. Important cargo will have to be escorted. Analysts point to instability in Iran, which creates additional difficulties. That's how things stand. That's why Putin remains silent. And what else can he do but stay silent? In principle, it's clear what remains to be done. To fulfill the conditions that have long been written and even agreed upon with Kyiv,